practice things.
Gone. It's recording to the cloud.
Welcome everyone to the February 14th, 2021 Delta Wordweavers story swap. I send out ahead of time all the sorts of days that could occur in February, and people have chosen one. Sometimes we've stretched what it could be to match a title, but that's okay. We're going to have fun today. Mine happened to come up first, being February 11th. It was suggested that on February 11th, it can be National Inventors Day. I'm going to tell you about Larry Walters, because Larry Walters was a guy that when he was 13 years old, he looked up into the sky and he could see the birds up there and the jets flying, and he said, I want to fly someday. Well, after high school graduation, he joined the Air Force. Maybe I'll be a pilot, but his eyesight failed the pilot's testing, so he couldn't be a pilot. After his naval service, he still had that dream. The truck driver on truck drivers' wages. He couldn't afford flying. He just really wanted to go up sometime. Now, when he had been 13 years old, he remembered he went Army Navy store, and he had seen weather in his mind all these years, and now he says, I'm going to do it. He had an invention to make his dream happen. Well, he had to create it along the way, so he went to the Army Navy store. He bought 42 weather balloons, several tanks of helium, and he got his own pellet gun. He had some, he was going to do this, and his day was going to be tomorrow. So he went even into the house to collect his pellet gun, and he made some sandwiches. He got out a 6-pack of Miller Lite. What else did he get? He got, he had to remember his glasses. He got a CB radio and a camera. And he had an altimeter, and he collected all that outside in like a, the portable lunch bag kind of thing. And he rigged that on the side of his lawn chair. He was going to launch his lawn chair of all things. And all kinds of things to him. He started by laying out, and he tethered them. He tethered them so that they would rise as he started blowing them up later. 4 tiers. He had it organized how it would work out. These 4 tiers of these balloons, and he tethered on, put on the side of his chair that kind of like I'm just saying, a picnic lunch, where he had his sandwiches and his 6-pack. He decided, I'm going up. So he started attaching the helium to each balloon. Again and again. And each balloon, you understand, was 4 foot across. And they started rising. And that chair, it didn't take much time for it to start rising. Now, he had attached it to the back bumper of his Jeep. And when the chair started going up just a little bit, he got into the chair to try it out, and this is going to work. This is going to work. And he kept working and working and working, and the balloons were starting to rise and rise and rise above him more and more. And they started tugging on that tether and tugging on the tether, but the tether was this heavy-duty plastic tether he'd gotten at the Army Navy store. And they held and they held. He was ready. Well, he had two tethers onto that bumper and he cut one. And as soon as he did, well, he thought, I'm going to just float up maybe 30 foot above my neighborhood. I'll be looking around the neighborhood. Now, I live in Southern California here by San Pedro, and I know I'm going to drift to the east. I'm going to go over the Mojave Desert, and maybe I'll even get to the Rocky Mountains before I decide to come down. Yes. And when I decide to come down, the reason I have my pellet gun, of course, is I could start shooting them, and then they'll let me down, one at a time as I shoot those balloons when I see a good landing spot. Oh, his dreams were big, because when he cut that one tether, oh, it was too much. All that pressure going up, pulling against it on the second one, it just jerked off of the bumper and he shot up just as if going out of a cannon. Oh my gosh, he shot up, no, not 30 foot, not even 100 foot, 1,000, 2,000. He was up at 11,000 feet before he was balancing up there. Oh my gosh, it scared him. And it was cold up there. He didn't bring a jacket. He was cold. Oh my gosh. He just was amazed and kind of sat tight in that chair, holding on for dear life. Oh. He was floating up there, and the hour went by and more hours. And then pretty soon he could see these jets coming by. Oh, he was up with the jet. Oh my gosh. He was up where the jets were coming down for a landing at the Long Beach Municipal Airport. Oh my gosh. And he was up there. He saw one jet going by. It was a TWA pilot. And that pilot had radioed into the tower. C3 tower, there is a man up here in a lawn chair. He's unprotected. And he's in our airspace. They tracked him. Indeed, he was on a blip on the radar, and they were able to follow him. So they followed him on the ground where he was, and they followed him in the air. They sent up a helicopter to track him. Well, the helicopter saw he was, in his position, he was safe just immediately, but something's got to give here. And they had to stop the landing of the airplanes for a time, because when he was in the airspace, and he's floating around this the Long Beach airport area, and then he started, that's by the coast, and the wind started pulling him around, and it took him out over the water. Oh my gosh, now he's over the water, and the sun was starting to set. What would they do with him? When the helicopter came closer, well, the blades would just kind of push him away. There wasn't anything they could do that way. They finally decided to above him by couple hundred feet above all of his weather balloons, and they dropped their cable down. He saw it coming, and he got that cable and attached it onto his chair so that they then drug him in the airspace, at least back over the land. Oh my goodness. And it was starting to get dark, and they just pulled him down. And also he got out his pellet gun, and he did start shooting some of the balloons that helped him come down. And then, oh my gosh, he dropped his gun. He couldn't shoot out anymore, but they pulled him down. He got caught in high tension power lines. They had to cut the power for 20 minutes. He didn't get electrocuted because those tethers were plastic. Saved his life in that case. That saved his life. And they cut the power so that the PG&E guys could go up there and help get him down. He finally got down, and the police were right there. They were right there ready to arrest him because he had interrupted the airspace. He had been up in an unauthorized aircraft. Well, they couldn't arrest him for that because he didn't have an aircraft. They were confused, but they found several things. They jailed him for a time. They gave him a fine. He didn't have any money. He's a truck driver. but he was in big trouble. Now, by then, of course, there was a newspaper reporter also waiting for him. And the newspaper reporter said, "Larry, what made you do that?" He looked at that reporter and said, "Well, I just couldn't sit there." That's the story of Larry Walters, who made a dream come through his own invention. When you read about Larry Walters, you can go right on the web. You'll find different elements in the story because he did it in July 2nd, 1982. 15 years later, it was on the internet, and the story was embellished. There's all kinds of little details that will be different as you read about Larry Walters. He gave his chair to the neighbor kid, and he lost contact with that neighbor kid for 20 years. And then the boy was grown up, and he gave up. He said, "I've got the chair." Oh, I see, and I didn't tell you. He attached for ballast milk cartons that he filled up with water, and he put like 30 of those. There's only 15 left here when he found the chair, but he had those down at the bottom of his chair for ballast. So it was quite an invention, and he made his dream happen, and people even copied him. They also went up in lawn chairs in future years. It was like crazy. Larry Walters. Thank you. I'm looking, did Ed Lewis arrive? No. Okay, moving along.
I think, were you trying to, I kept getting the spotlight and I was removing it because I like looking at gallery view, but so I think maybe I shouldn't be a co-host anymore, so
Oh,
I didn't mean to be, that was my fault, I'm sorry.
I kept spotlighting Marion and it kept going away. I was going, what?
I know, I'm so sorry, because I love looking at gallery view when I'm not telling so I can see everyone's reactions. So I kept removing it and I realized halfway through that that was my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay, Claire will fix that and we're going to move on.
All right.
But thank you for clarifying it with each other. Sally. Sally Holtzman, are you ready to tell your story?
Okay, let's see. I'm not sure what I'm doing here.
Okay, while you're thinking about it, hers goes with February 14th, Valentine's Day. So we have a couple that match for that, which is fine because that's today. Sally has a Valentine's story.
So how do I get spotlighted? Like I'm in
We'll take care of it.
I'm doing it now, I hope.
Okay.
The host takes care of it.
Okay, now I have two up here.
Let's see.
I have Sarah and myself.
Sarah, can we?
I'm saying the teller doesn't have to worry about their own spotlighting, that our host, Clara.
Okay, I'm removing the spotlight on. There we go.
All right. Okay, well, this is, I'm at my friend Shelley's house and I don't know what to do with the light. So somebody passed me some powder in my nose. Okay, here we go. VICTORY, victory, victory is our cry. Do we have it? Well, I guess. Victory, victory, yes, yes, yes. I went to Victory High School. No, I went to Victory Grammar School. It was built in 1919 as a one-room schoolhouse for the education of mill children. Those were the sons and the daughters of the Appalachian people that had come down to work in the textile industry. But by the time I went to the school, it had become a full grammar school, 1st through 8th grade. And not only did it educate the mill children who worked around Gastonia, North Carolina, where I lived, but it also educated those of us that lived on New Hope Road and Lilac Lane. So on the first day of school, my mother took me to my first grade classroom, and outside the door, she looked at me and said, "Now, Sally Joy, you are not to talk unless the teacher calls upon you. Now, you be a good girl." You see, I think my mother was afraid that I had brought all my imaginary friends with me to first grade, and that I was going to have an ongoing conversation with them during school. But I was so shy and so timid that I don't think my teachers even knew I was in the classroom. Well, not until fourth grade. Now, in fourth grade, I had Mrs. Hooper. Mrs. Hooper was strict and straight. Now, what I mean about straight was she had straight hair, she wore straight skirts, the papers on her bulletin board were straight, 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 straight. She would come in the morning and look down the rows of seats to make, "Billy, move your chair a little bit," to make sure that they were straight. Everything had to be straight. And the ruler, the 12-inch ruler, was also placed exactly parallel to the edge of the desk. And in the morning, she would pick that ruler up and we would sing, "God Bless America," along with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer. This was the South, you know. And everything was fine. And she loved holidays. She loved holidays. And her bulletin board for Easter, she had crepe paper in green and yellow, and for Christmas, yellow, red and green. And for Valentine's Day, red crepe paper hung up with little lace dollies. And she said to us, "Now for Valentine's Day, which is one of my favorite holidays, I want you to bring Valentine's cards for your friends." Now, she did not say bring Valentine cards for everybody in the classroom like they do now. She said, "Bring Valentine cards for your friends." And I had this sinking feeling in my heart because I was not very popular and I didn't anticipate getting very many Valentine cards. Well, Valentine's Day came, and Mrs. Hooper had a huge sack on her table, and she had everybody bring up their Valentine cards and put them in. And then she began to take them out one by one and call our names. "And this one is for Patrick." And Patrick would run up to the desk and get the card and put it on his desk. And so it went. And my name wasn't called, but Shirley's name. Shirley was the most popular girl in the class. "And this one is for Shirley. And this one is for Shirley." And Shirley was running back and forth until we got to the end of the sack. And Mrs. Hooper reached in and she brought up an envelope that was larger than the rest and kind of yellow. And she was holding it by the corner, sort of tight. "And this is for Shirley." And Shirley came up and she took the card and she brought it back to her desk and she put it down. And I was just 2 or 3 desks in front of her and to the side. So I turned my head and said, "Who's that from?" And she said, and I said, "Who's that from?" And she said, "Billy." Now, Billy was the biggest boy in our class, and he was a mill boy. And Mrs. Hooper did not like him. She found an excuse to hit him on the hand almost every day. "Billy, stop looking out the window. Give me your hand." Pow. Billy, are you making those strange noises? Give me your hand." Pow. Almost every day. And so when I said to Shirley, "Who's it from?" she wrote something down on a piece of paper and threw it towards my desk. And I bent down to pick it up. And when I looked up, who was there? Why, it was Mrs. Hooper. "Sally, we do not pass notes in Mrs. Hooper's class. Hold out your hand." Hold out my hand? I had never been hit in my whole life. My parents never spanked me. No one had ever hit me in my whole life. I held out my hand. And Mrs. Hooper took that ruler and she went, pow. Oh, it hurt so much. And Billy, who sat right next to me, looked at me and he said, "Spit in it." "What?" "Spit in it." "Spit." So I spat. And now rub it. Oh, it felt a lot better. Huh. Thank you, Billy. And after class, I walked out with Billy and I said, Billy, how do you do it? You get hit with the ruler all the time and you never cry. And he said, look at my hand. I've been picking cotton since I was a little boy, and there were calluses all over his hand. And Billy and I became good friends. We walked across the playground every day. Billy would turn to go to Milltown and I would turn to go to New Hope Road. And everybody knew that Billy was my friend. And since he was the biggest and the strongest boy in class, nobody ever chased me on the playground, believe me. And when I got home that day, I told my mother about Mrs. Hooper, and she was shocked that anyone had dared to paddle her child. And I told her about Billy and how brave he was. And I said, Ma, can I have Billy for a friend? And she said, why, of course, of course. If Billy's parents send him to school every day, they must think education is very important. Of course you can have Billy for a friend. And so we remained friends. And then summer came and the next year came, and now we were in 5th grade and Valentine's Day came. And that teacher, the 5th grade teacher, was not so in love with Valentine's Day. That teacher just said, bring a Valentine's and we'll exchange in class. And that's what we did. But at the store, I asked my mother, can I buy a special Valentine for Billy? And I did. I brought a great big Valentine card. And then I thought long and hard, what was I going to say? I know. Roses are red, violets are blue. You are my friend, and I am your friend too, Sally. And I handed it to him in class, and he looked at that big card, and he said to me, and you're my Valentine. My first Valentine. Thank you. Oh.
Fabulous, Shelley. Love that.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Brought tears to my eyes.
Oh,
Sweet.
your hair's really short.
Great. Thank you. And our next person is also on February 14th, Valentine's Day, and Rocky's on. You're next, Rocky. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to.
Unless you're still talking. Oh, yeah.
Okay, listen, you. Okay, other people, we're good.
Just setting up my story here. Marcy handed me the wet, soapy washcloth to wipe off his bronze lips. My 3 best girlfriends gathered in closer for a good look. We were all in 8th grade, 13 years old, about to go to high school. And I knew I had something to teach because I had looked up French kiss in the dictionary. An open mouth kiss where the 2 tongues touch. Now, this was very important to teach, but bronze men did not have a tongue on offer, so I would have to use my imagination and make up the difference. You see, after school, my friends and I were gathering to practice the art of kissing. Now, this was very important for us in 8th grade because we had started to go to bar mitzvahs and Friday night dances, and kissing was the thing, and we knew there was a right way to do it. We'd all watched the movies and saw how exciting it was, and so we knew we had to practice. We were trying on boyfriends, so-called boyfriends, for weeks at a time like new jackets, and we wanted to be able to do kissing right. So we gathered in Marcy's living room where there was a bust of a generic man on a pedestal at just the right height underneath the staircase in her 2-story house. Now, we only gathered in the afternoon at the time when Marcy's older brother Eric was at football practice, so he wouldn't be around to make fun of us. Each of the girls brought a different aspect. We all studied it and we all had advice on what to do. For example, Anne said it's important to close your eyes when you go in for the kiss. Otherwise, it would be like two owls staring at each other when they kissed. And Janet suggested that it's really nice, she'd seen it in the movies, when you bring the face in close. And we thought, oh, that'd be wonderful. So we all practiced bringing the face in close. And I suggested it would also be nice to put your hand around the guy's neck and stroke it and maybe stroke the hair a little bit. And we all practiced that. And then it was my turn to instruct about the French kiss. And I said, you part your lips lightly and have the tongue at the ready in the back. And we practiced on the luscious lips of Bronze Man. And the girl said, ew, it's slimy. And I said, no, you have to do it, no slobber there. You just keep practicing. And I kind of amended the lesson. I thought it might be appropriate. I said that when the two tongues touch, there's a spark, because I'd read about the spark of love and people seemed to get really excited when they kissed and there was a spark. So I said, probably when the two tongues touch, there's a spark. And we all practiced. And eventually we got confident enough to go out and try our skills on the sweet, innocent boys attached to real lips that weren't hard and cold, but soft and pliant. About 20 years later, all grown up, I was sitting in a coffee house in Berkeley, sipping my caramel venti macchiato, whatever, and I noticed a handsome man a few tables over trying to make eye contact with me. He was friendly, he had friendly eyes and a smile, but I didn't know him from Adam, so I just kept my nose buried in the book. And then he stood up and came over and introduced himself. Oh, now I see. Of course, it's you, Eric, Marcy's brother. Marcy and I had lost touch over the years, but we chatted, Eric and I. He told me she was doing well and he was doing well. He was happily married with kids and he asked me how I was doing and I told him and we chatted a bit more. And then as he was turning to go, he turned back. He wanted to say something. He hesitated and then he just dived right in and he said, "Great kissing lessons." Turns out Eric and his football buddies sometimes got off football practice a little bit earlier than we had known about back in those days. And they had snuck up and they were on the second floor landing on their bellies, listening over the banister, listening and watching and taking it all in, those days of kissing practice. And Eric, as he turned to go, he thanked me. He said, my wife says I'm the best kisser ever. In fact, that's what made her fall for me. So thanks. Turns out practice is everything. Thank you, Bronze Man.
And thank you, Rocky.
Thank you.
Great Valentine story. All right. So leaving February 14th, our next time is on February 16th. It says, do a grouch a favor day. Well, we may be stretching it, but that's what Linda Kennedy thought her story, Old Joe and the Carpenter, a folktale, as retold by Pleasant to Spain, could fit. Do a grouch a favor day. Linda, Tell us the folk tale. When you unmute,
Okay,
there
unmute
we-
my, okay. Now I need to get rid of that thing in the, oh, there we are. Okay. I found this story years and years ago in a book called Peace Tales. I have it here. World Folk Tales to Talk About by Margaret Reed MacDonald. And I've told it many times, but I haven't told it for a long time, but yet it's the one I wanted to choose after what we've been going through in this last year, and it just felt right. Old Joe was a farmer. He lived on a farm that actually he had grown up on. His mother and father, his sisters and brothers were all raised on that farm. Then when he got married, he and his wife raised their children on that farm. But now the wife was gone, the children grown and off married in their own homes. He was all alone, except next door. There was another farmer who was also alone, and they had been friends for a long, long time, just the best of friends. One day, the neighbor farmer, found a stray calf on his property, and he said to old Joe, "Look at the stray calf I just found. I didn't even know I had it." And old Joe said, "But I think that calf belongs to me. Take a look at it. It looks a lot like my favorite cow." "No," said the neighbor, "that's my calf." And they argued, which they really had never done before. And finally, they settled the day by not settling the argument at all. They went home, slammed their doors, and days went by. A week went by, and they had not spoken to each other. Well, one morning, Joe was sitting there in his kitchen, stirring his coffee. He was sad because he was missing his friendship of his best friend, but yet he was angry because he was sure that calf was his. And then there was a knock on the door. He wasn't expecting anybody, so he knew that it was his neighbor coming to apologize. He went to the door expecting to see his neighbor. But when he opened the door, there stood a stranger, a young man, who said, "I am a carpenter traveling through, and I'm wondering if you have a job for me to do." Well, Joe, he would not hire anybody he didn't know. So he said, "Come on in, have a cup of coffee. Let's get acquainted." So it was, they sat there and shared some biscuits and coffee, and Joe talked to him for quite a while. And finally he said, "You know, I would like to hire you, and I have a job I want you to do for me. Come with me, look out the back kitchen window with me." So they walked across the kitchen, looked out the window. Joe said, "Do you see that ditch that's out there between my farm and the neighbor's farm? That ditch didn't used to be there. We were such good friends, we didn't even have a fence there. We let our animals cross back and forth to different pastures. But my neighbor, gosh darn him, he got out his tractor and plow and he dug that ditch and flooded it. So no, my animals can't go back and forth. I am so mad at him. I want you to build a fence so I don't see that ditch. I don't want to see that other pasture. I want that fence so high, I don't want to see my neighbor's farmhouse." The carpenter said, "I think I can build you exactly what you need. I'll need some lumber." So they went on back out to the barn, and there was some lumber there, and they gathered it up. Joe said, "You know, this isn't going to be enough for the fence I need. I'm going to go on into town. You get started with what we have here." And so the carpenter carried the lumber over to the ditch. He measured, he sawed, he hammered. And when Joe came back from town, he found the carpenter sitting there on the front porch. But he didn't see a fence to the left or to the right beyond the house. He said, "I see you're taking a little break." The carpenter said, "No, I'm finished. Come around back with me." So they went around to the back of the house, and there was no fence, but there was a beautiful bridge. And the bridge was as wide for two people to walk side by side. It was perfect for old men. It had handrails. And before old Joe could say anything, is his surprise to the carpenter, he saw his neighbor crossing over from the other side, saying, "Joe, I can see by this beautiful symbol of friendship that you have forgiven me, and I'm so sorry for saying it was my calf. I'm sure it was probably yours. Please forgive me." And so it was. They met in the middle of the bridge. They hugged each other, and then they went back to the carpenter. And Joe said, "Oh, this is a perfect, well done project. I am sure that my friend and I could find many more jobs for you to do." And the carpenter picked up his toolbox, put it up on his shoulders, and said, "Thank you for the offer, but I must be on my way, for I have many more bridges to build." Like a bridge over troubled water, I will ease your pain and mind. Okay, I'm off now. I've got bridges to build too. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, so much. We need that. We need that a lot. Somehow it reminded me, I went to church this morning and he talked about Corinthians 13, love conquers all, and doggone, as soon as he was off, I made a comment about who didn't sing today to my husband, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I've judged somebody and criticized them right after the sermon. That was terrible, terrible. So I apologized to my husband, like, I shouldn't have even said that. It is so easy to get the judgments out there and to break the bridges. It's just so easy. So I have to watch my tongue, and neighbors, I need to take a breath. We all need to take a breath and try and be nice to each other. Thank you for the reminders. Folk tales and all our stories today are teaching us a lot. Okay, we're going to take like just a 4-minute break. At my house, it's 2:52. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, about 5 minutes, 5 or 6. February, we have 3 tellers. So we will hear from Suze, then from Mike, and then from Alyssa.
Okay.
So Sue Champenier, let's see.
All right.
She's broadly speaking on February 22nd, World Thinking Day. She's going to tell a fairy tale. It's from a library book, a memoir, travel book. Caliphus, how do you say it? Caliphus House by Tahir Shah.
Okay.
Take a child to the library. Suze?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm in Philadelphia, and I am overwhelmed by the climate, but not the chilly, cold climate here in Pennsylvania. No, the political climate, the social climate, economic inequities. You know, it all gets down to power. Some say that all politics is local, but I think power is personal. It's who has it, but it's also about who uses it and how they use it and how they abuse it. As Marion said, February 22nd is World Thinking Day. And much of the thinking of the world on society and power in society is expressed in stories. This one is from Morocco, and it was collected by Tahir Shah for his memoir, The Caliph's House, which was published in 2006, which means that this story has been told and is told in the 21st century in Casablanca. A long time ago, there was a kitchen in a palace in Morocco. This kitchen was as fine as any kitchen anywhere in the world. On the walls hung pots and pans of iron and shiny copper. There were piles of produce, purple eggplants and red bell peppers and carrots. And there were baskets of spices and ginger root and cinnamon sticks. Smelled great. In the center of this kitchen was a huge, a huge chimney. And under the chimney was a large black iron stove. And running around the kitchen day and night were chefs, 20 chefs and 20 sous chefs preparing the food for the Sultan and his guests. Peacock pies, roast lamb and venison rested under the window. And the piece de resistance were platters of meatballs covered in white sauce because the Sultan loved meatballs. A junior chef was working on the last batch of meatballs. He put the glop in his hand and, rubbed it, glooped it around and made each meatball and put it out on the tray. Someone opened the big door of the hot oven and he shoved the pan of meatballs in, slammed the door, and it began to heat up and get hotter and hotter. The fat sizzled and sizzled and popped. And the meatballs began to cook and bake. And then they called out, "Help, help, we are being cooked alive. Do something, anything, save us." And the biggest meatball raised himself up to his biggest largesse and said, "Have faith, I will save you. Salvation will come in the most unusual way. A soothing medicine will be applied to cool your burns, and a soft bed will be given to you to rest upon." Well, that calmed them down, and the oven opened. Sure enough, the junior chef poured some white yogurt sauce on the meatballs. He shut the door, but the temperature rose again. And it soon became hotter and hotter. And the meatballs closest to the door, they roasted. So the other meatballs called out, "Save us, save our souls. We will follow you to the end of the earth, but you must save us from this heat." And their leader, the largest meatball, said, "Calm yourselves. I promise you the heat will end." And then the door opened and the chef reached in and he pulled out the meatballs. And he, kind of shook the tray and loosened them up. And then he tipped the tray and the meatballs rolled onto a yellow saffron bed of rice. The meatballs were overjoyed. And as they rested, a server came in, picked up the tray, put it on his back of his hand, and carried it into the Sultan's dining hall. The meatballs were overjoyed. They couldn't believe their luck. The the leader said, "See, I told you. I told you that our fortunes would change. You must believe in me." And they praised him as the tray was rested on the table in front of the Sultan. Well, some of the meatballs were absolutely dazzled by the jewels around the neck of the Sultan, and others were mesmerized by the soft music of the oboe and flute. Ah, this is the life. They didn't notice that the brotherhood of the meatballs was being broken up. A server scooped the meatballs, a few at a time, onto plates and gave them to the hungry guests who gobbled them up. The Sultan himself took a long fork and speared 6 at one time, gulped them down. Oh no, what is happening? The meatballs called out, "We are being exterminated. Help, help." Well, the leader was getting a little disgusted and he said to them, "Hey, didn't I tell you, and don't you agree that there was medicinal white sauce that cooled your burns?" Yes, yes, they agree. Yes, that's true. "And weren't you placed on a soft bed of rice?" Yes, yes, that indeed happened. "What is the matter? When are you going to understand? You are meatballs, and you are destined to for the stomachs of hungry people." And at that, the Sultan speared the leader meatball and ate him in 2 bites. The remaining meatballs continued to complain, but there was no one left to hear their cries. And that, my friends, is my thought on the current political situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Suze. All right. That's the first meatball story I have heard. That's great. And yes, attributed to today, no problem. Welcome to Ida. Welcome to Melinda. Glad you could join our session today. So our next teller is Michael. And Michael Pruitt is preparing for a competition with the Toastmasters. He's lived in Antioch for 25 years. He's a volunteer with the Antioch Family History Center, where he helps people research their family trees. Oh, I'd be interested in talking with Mike some more about that. He's talking about his family's immigration from to California during the Great Depression. So he's going to take us back 100 years. Let's listen to Mike. You're still muted.
Thank you, Marion.
You're
Happy
welcome.
Valentine's Day, everyone. I have a question for you. What did the pickle say to his girlfriend on Valentine's Day? You mean a great deal to me. I have 3 questions for you. When were you born? Where were you born? And why were you born there? When I grew up, I knew when I was born, I knew where I was born, but I didn't know why I was born there until I learned my father's story. Well, my father's story starts with his father who was born in 1901 and grew up with a farm family as one of 10 children in Oklahoma. And those children grew up and they got married, they started their families, they started their own farms. But when the Great Depression hit and the farm prices plummeted, they could not make their mortgage payments and they lost their farms. But they heard that there was work in California. So like Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies, they loaded up their trucks and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is, swimming pools, movie stars. Actually, they only made it to Bakersfield. But when they got there, they had skills and experience from working on farms, and they were able to get work as migrant farm workers. Now, their family, this big family, had a little caravan of cars and trucks, and they did what I call the California to Oregon Trail. They would start in Bakersfield where they picked cotton and raisin grapes. And my father was born in Bakersfield. Then in the winter, they would move to Cottage Grove, Oregon, where the men would work in a lumber mill. And in the spring, they would move to Salem, Oregon, and they would pick hops and beans and berries. And then in the summer, they would come back down to California to pick fruit only a couple of miles from here in Brentwood. And my father tells me that there was a tent city with 12,000 people there during the summer, and he lived in a tent. Well, one of the places they stopped in their migration was a little farming community called Reedley, California. And in 1937, I have a picture of his class, his first grade class, and I want to share it with you if I can do a share screen. See if I have the rights to do that. Okay, here we go. So here's the first grade class. And you'll see here that there's like 15 children in the class, something like that. In the first row, there's 9 little boys. And if you look closely, what you'll find is that 4 of these little boys have no shoes. And I asked my dad about that. I said, why didn't they have shoes? He said, oh, that's an interesting story. He says, there was only 4 or 5 girls in the class, and there was like 12 boys. And so one day I thought, you know what, maybe if I could make one of these girls feel sorry for me, I could get her as a girlfriend. So he took off his shoes and he went to school. And sure enough, he got the attention of one of the cute little girls, and she became his girlfriend. Well, the other boys figured that out, so they started taking off their shoes also, but there was only like 4 girls, so after 4 boys got their shoes taken off, there was no more girls to get as girlfriends, and that the shoe taking off stopped. That's why there's only 4 boys without shoes. I don't believe his story, but anyway, that was his story, and he was sticking to it. So let's see if I can exit the screen here. Right, did I stop share screen? Okay, there I am again. So time went by, and my father had an early growth spurt. When he was 12 years old, he was 6 feet tall. And when he was 13 years old, he was driving the trucks during harvest time. And time went by some more, and he ended up in Reedley again. He was 16 years old, and he was a junior in high school. And he decided that he was going to stop moving around with all the migrant farm workers and the family. So he bought himself one of those teardrop trailers. You know, they look like a little teardrop turn on the side. And he parked it in a campground outside of Reedley. And he worked his way through the rest of high school and junior college. And he loved to be on the debate team. He loved to debate about things. He wanted to change the world. So when he got out of junior college, he applied for and was accepted to a political science program at University of California. And he moved to Berkeley. And that's where he met my mother. So now I know when I was born, where I was born, and why I was born there. Do you know your father's story? Do you know your mother's story? Do you know the stories of your parents and your grandparents? Those stories can disappear when those people disappear, when their close relatives disappear. So I have a challenge for you. Talk to your relatives. If your father is still around, talk to him. Write down their stories. Ask for pictures. I have been doing family history research for about 40 years, and I've helped a lot of people. And one thing that I've found is that you need to write down the names of the people in those pictures, because if there's no names, those pictures will just be a mystery to the future descendants. I also love to help people do their family history research. And at the Family History Center where I volunteer, we have free access to the world's largest genealogy databases. That includes Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, Family Search, and others, with about 40 billion records. All those records are wonderful. We can find names, we can find dates, we can find places. But unless someone has written down the family stories, you might not be able to get answers to the whys in your question. So I invite you to talk to people in your family. See if you can find out not only when you were born, where you were born, but why you were born there, because you know your father's story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, so much. A good challenge for us because, yeah, I have questions, and so of my elders who are not here. So it challenges us that he's right. We need to write our own stories, at least some notes, so that others can follow along. Thank you so much. That's a great challenge to us and a good reminder. And it was so interesting to hear your family stories, that they're right out here in Brentwood, near where I live, and some of us in this session today. Our next teller will be Alyssa. We're going to February 24th, and it has a note, it could be Eat Right Day. So Alyssa's gonna tell us her story. And thank you. This is the first time Alyssa has told with us, so welcome so much to Alyssa Hammond. Let's see, we got to get you unmuted, dear.
Alyssa, unmute.
Oh, there I am. All right, let's see.
You're good.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I sat in, a month or so ago and got reconnected with Claire, and then found other storytelling groups. So this has been a nice little journey. So thank you. And we'll see how this fits in with the theme. there's a lot of memes out there, and I feel like memes these days are like magazines with me growing up. And one that I used to share with my girlfriends and we'd laugh about is I wish I was as thin as the first time I thought I was fat. And just a funny little snapshot that we would send to each other um, and laugh about it. That was just a funny thing. But that was a few years ago that we would joke about that. And now we're in a pandemic and there are riots, and I have teenagers at home who should be out with their friends, but they are forced to be indoors while they know full well that the world outside is a mess. And it's a mess because of us adults. The politicians fight often just for the sake of fighting, and people argue over whose life matters. And I can't do anything about this world outside our doors. And I feel hopeless. I feel like I actually can't control anything in my life. And then this meme pops in my head over and over again. And I wish I was as thin as the first time I thought I was fat. I wish I was as thin as the first time I thought I was fat. And people are posting about pandemic pounds. And my friends are telling me that the endorphins from exercising will help me feel better. So I think, what if I was as thin as the first time I thought I was fat? I've got a new unused Peloton bike in my bedroom, thanks to pre-quarantine high hopes. I've got a limited supply of food, thanks to COVID restrictions. I feel like I can do this. I can get to the weight I was when I first thought I was fat. I can control something in this uncontrolled, messy world. And because of this messy world and nation that we live in, I first thought I was fat early on in high school. I was barely 130 pounds. I was 5'5", and I was an athlete. I wore a size 6, maybe, but I always felt like I should be smaller. The supermodels all in the magazines were 6 inches taller than I was, but we were wearing size 4 and size 2. So why was I wearing a size 6? I should be smaller. The magazines and the entertainment shows told me, a teenager, to be smaller. So I did what too many teenage girls did when I was growing up, and unfortunately, I think they still do. I binged and I purged, I exercised a lot, and I ate less. And I weighed myself regularly to see if all of this was working, and it wasn't working. I stayed right around 130 pounds in a size 6 until I got to college. And then, oh no, I got to college in the freshman 15, and I don't even know why that's a thing. But I'll leave the late 80s and the 90s for another day and get back to 2020. Here I am, stuck in my home in March of 2020, feeling like I have no control over anything. So I decide to control me. I don't binge and purge like I did when I was a teenager, but I do get on the Peloton bike almost every day, and I limit what I eat. This is not a natural thing for me to do. I don't cycle. I love dessert. And I haven't had an exercise routine for over a year, but it's a pandemic. There are people dying. So I control what I can control. I weigh myself weekly and then daily. And by the end of May, it happens. I can feel it. My clothes are looser. My form-fitting yoga pants are now moving all around me. And I'm excited, but I'm also a little concerned. I hop on the scale and I put this in my journal. May 28, 2020, 129.9. This is what I can control. I did it. I'm now as thin as the first time I thought I was when thought I was fat. And I will say what I hope you are thinking. Who cares? Because this is not a before and after success story. Weight, I discover, though I really knew all along, is such a dumb goal. What does being under 130 pounds get me? Nothing. I'm still stuck in my home. My kids are still without their friends. People are still dying. So who cares how much I weigh? And it's at this time, this spring, summer 2020, that I'm not just focused on my weight. I'm actually focused on other people, first and foremost, my children. And I'm going to Black Lives Matters protests, and I'm donating money, and I'm making calls and sending postcards and texts to voters to get them motivated for this upcoming election. But all of these efforts don't have results. I can see controlling my food and exercise has a result. I can see 129.9. And what I see is that this prize, this result, this focus on weight is absolutely absurd. I should be focused on how strong I am and how fit I am, and 100% on how fortunate I am to be in a home with food and children that I love. But instead, I see these numbers in my head, thanks to all the memes and the magazines over my entire life. And what I'm thinking now is that maybe we are not trying to get to the weight we were when we first thought we were fat. I'm thinking maybe there's a little more to it than that. Maybe we all just want to be as happy as the first time we thought we were sad, and as young as the first time we thought we were old. But we cannot turn this clock back. And chances are that if we did, we might see something else, something less desirable. So now I'm trying to move on from 2020 in a way that helps me appreciate where I am. I am older and sadder and looser than I've ever been in my life. And with all that's going on in the world, that should be okay. It does not make a great meme, but it makes me. Thank you. The end.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I check in the chat. I don't know, nobody's using chat, but I wrote a message in the chat, Alyssa.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Powerful story. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share it.
You're welcome. Anybody can unmute themselves now. Just briefly, did anyone else additionally have a little story for today? Because we'll just chat and close out here. So thank you all for sharing.
I don't have a story, but since it's, I'd like to say happy Valentine's Day again, and I have one more question for you.
Yes.
What did the telephone say to propose to his girlfriend on Valentine's Day?
Leave me a message.
He didn't say anything, but he gave her a ring.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
That's great.
Jokes.
That will Claire stop the recording. So thank you, listening people. Video, come. Oh, wait. Leave the recording on for a minute. Next month with Delta Wordweavers will be youth tellers. If I don't get enough youth tellers, and I'll utilize a few adults, but I'm hoping to get even more youth tellers. It's March 14th, 2 o'clock. Thank you for that. Bye, video people.